6, 1944, D-Day.
The troops in World War II were the first to benefit widely from new antibiotic drugs. Penicillin, first discovered in the 1930s, was pushed into mass production as part of the war effort.
From a Canadian factory comes the story of production of one of the greatest of modern discoveries in medicine, penicillin. Penicillin is mass-produced, and it is going out in quantity to the fighting front to reduce the danger of infection by germs in wounds. Thousands of lives have been saved by this drug. It is one of the things that have made this war slightly less hideous than was expected.
The medical teams that backed up the D-Day landings were supplied with a new drug. Army Dr. James Lewis was part of the battlefield medical unit.
I saw a paratrooper with a big hole in his chest. I'd never seen anything like that before. I was getting serious abdominal wounds, chest wounds, amputations, head wounds, that sort of thing, where the potential for infection was very grave.
Penicillin saved wounded men who otherwise would have died from battlefield infections.
I had one casualty who had been hit with a shell that had blown his thigh open and blown manure into it, which had to be scraped out with a brush. Now, these are potentially terrible infections, and I think penicillin played a big role. It was a miracle drug.
Thousands of men, thanks to penicillin and plasma, will come home to their thankful families. The whole world of peace to come will reap the benefits of this great wartime medical discovery. Science has won another victory over death.
For civilians, the benefits of modern medicine came gradually. In Europe, 18 million people had been displaced by the war. When refugees arrived at a new encampment, they were sprayed to guard against the spread of epidemic diseases. DDT, first developed to protect soldiers in the tropics, was used to combat typhus, lice, and ticks. Penicillin cleared up pneumonia and other infections. Everyone was sprayed. But still, the bombed-out cities of Europe were breeding grounds for disease.
In biblical days, his name was pestilence. His modern name is epidemic disease. His shadow is in the sewer waters of 1,000 towns. These people slake their thirst with typhoid fever and dysentery, with infectious jaundice, and possibly with infantile paralysis. A wave of tuberculosis which spread over Europe with the German armies could not be stopped without food, shelter, and sanitation.
Governments across Europe launched new programs to control the spread of highly infectious diseases like tuberculosis.
A big ceremony in St. George's Square opens Glasgow's 5-week campaign against tuberculosis. 37 mobile X-ray units, the biggest fleet ever gathered together, have converged on Glasgow from all parts of the British Isles. This help from over the border is very welcome, for Glasgow has the highest tuberculosis rate in Western Europe, and nothing short of all-out medical war will conquer the terrible disease.
The X-ray teams were looking for the shadow of TB in the lung. But even after cases had been found, doctors could do little for them unless new drugs were developed. Bed rest, fresh air, and isolation to control the spread of the disease were the only prescriptions. Living in London's East End, Marjorie Cave was one of several members of her family to contract TB.
Oh, they were terrified of it, terrified of catching it. My mother was very ill, and I saw her have hemorrhages and breathless attacks and fits of coughing in the night, and it was very frightening. And you felt that death was going to be the end. I didn't know then it was TB, but I'd seen it all. And then after she died, I learned that it was TB. So when I saw myself getting thinner and paler and more breathless and coughing, I thought, this is it, I'm the next. And I was right. I whole outlook was very, very bleak. That's, of course, if you survived. They thought I wouldn't live 3 months, so I suppose really it wasn't too big a problem where I was going to live and work.
Throughout the world, thousands of TB sufferers were sent to convalesce in special sanitariums. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't.
Ce sont des tuberculeux qui vont vivre dans ce village durant des années pour sauver leurs poumons. À heure fixe, allongés sur les terrasses, les malades attendent de la montagne le miracle de l'air pur.
Patients were of all ages. Doctors sometimes intervene with surgery. One procedure involved removing several ribs to ease the pressure on the damaged lungs. Les Ellis's operation was done under local anesthetic.
There was a doctor there to hold your hand. You're laying there, and you're strapped on, of course. And then the first thing I knew was Dr. Murphy. He was holding my hand as high as he could so I could get at the ribs, I suppose. Now, he said, you'll hear a crack, he said. Well, don't worry about it, it's just one of your ribs, you know. And there was just a great bang, just like somebody breaking a piece of wood. And then that would go on until we'd take the other end of the rib out, bang. It was all right if you didn't laugh.
With TB still taking so many lives, scientists strained to find a cure. In the United States, Hollywood joined the effort.
Every 5 minutes, another American breaks down with tuberculosis. It can happen to any of us, age, sex, rich or poor. It doesn't make any difference. But right now, each of us has the opportunity to join in the fight against TB through our purchase of Christmas seals.
Now, just a minute. What's the idea of driving through the police gate?
Hey, look, what is this, a gag? Now, what's the idea? Come on,
I'm a studio policeman.
Oh, stop. What's the gag?
I'm making some extra money.
For what? What do you need, money?
I need plenty of money, Abbott. I need plenty of money so I can go out and buy some more Christmas seals.
Yes, you should buy Christmas seals to help keep all of us from catching tuberculosis.
In 1954, the fundraising effort paid off.
A new series of wonder drugs joins the fight on tuberculosis. 2 pharmaceutical laboratories simultaneously developed the new synthetic hydrazid as an anti-TB agent.
The breakthrough was based on the work pioneered with penicillin, the wonder drug of World War II. And within 5 years, the number of TB deaths in the developed world was cut in half. And Americans came to expect medical science to perform similar miracles on other diseases. The next target was polio.
My name is Virus Poliomyelitis. I consider myself quite an artist, sort of sculptor. I specialize in grotesques, twisting and deforming human bodies. That's why I'm called the Crippler. You've never seen me, but I'm sure you've seen my shadow.
In the early 1950s, America was in the grip of a polio epidemic. Children were especially vulnerable. The disease destroyed the nerves. Its victims lost control of their muscles. Parents lived in constant fear that polio might strike their children. Deborah Runkle's family lived in Minneapolis.
When I was young, everybody was frightened of polio. By that I mean the mothers were frightened, and they made their children frightened because our mothers would always do things so that we wouldn't get polio, or they'd talk about polio, or tell us to do things so we'd be careful not to get polio.
People thought the virus was passed on through water. In the summer, many public swimming pools were closed. The 7-year-old Gerald twins lived in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood in Montgomery, Alabama, site of the nation's worst polio outbreak of 1953.
We knew that there was an epidemic going around, but you're kids and you got a warning from your parents, but goes in one ear and kind of 95% goes out the other ear.
One hot day that summer, Jim Jarrell had gone to a movie in town with his brother.
We walked back home. When I got home, I started feeling ill, a stiff neck, and just generally sick. And my parents realized, my mother being a nurse, that I probably wasn't just an upset stomach.
And all of a sudden, I got real sick. And my mother rushed in and made a real big fuss over it, and I was going, well, what's all the big fuss? My brother's sick, not me.
In fact, both Jarrell twins had contracted polio, their legs severely paralyzed. They spent a year undergoing physical therapy together in Warm Springs, Georgia, where their father often filmed their progress.
We were still flat on our back at that point. Remember that, Bill?
Yeah, my mother's in black and white there.
You are.
Yeah, batting around. I can remember actually being there and doing this sort of things. And it was a cool, crisp day. We had our sweaters on, and we were really proud because this was where our parents had seen us get up on our crutches.
First time, yeah. So we were getting up, showing off what we could do there. And this is when we first started walking again. Of course, it was with crutches. See there, the ladies behind us there are the physical therapists that were there. Initially, the doctors told our parents that we would never walk again, that it was too severe a case of polio.